It may be that you've got one little control point that needs to move up a tenth of a millimeter. Wow. And that and you might spend a week chasing these.
Is that how you do it?
Flat spots around the car.
I'm Erin McDermott, and this is, I guess, going to be the Odd Engineer podcast. I don't know what else to call it yet. This is the first one, hopefully, of many. We're happy to have Adam Kenney with us as the first guest. Other podcasts might feature people who can help out with teaching us how to freelance, and they might be in other fields that aren't actually engineering. But Adam Kenney is an engineer, and he is a contractor, so he's the best of both worlds. And he's also someone that listeners can go onto Odd Engineer and book time with immediately right now and get his one-on-one personal advice. So thank you for being here, Adam.
Thank you.
Letting me peg you with questions.
That's all right.
So I used to work in automotive illumination design, and I was surrounded by CAD modelers. And when they would talk about your haloed position, it was like, but if you could do ClassA surface, that's hard. You know, like they would talk about it with hushed breath. And the people who actually got to play with the clay and be there at the first, you know, actually doing the fascia stuff instead of, you know, what we would do, which is just like moving around PCBs so they're in the perfectly correct position and that type of stuff. So I know a lot of people would love to know, how do you get from CAD monkey to up into this other level where
we're still CAD monkeys.
But it's art. I think you're an artist. You have 1 foot in CAD design and 1 foot in artistic rendering, I think.
Yeah, I think so. You're kind of you're the bridge, I guess, between. I mean, you're the conduit most of the time for ClassA. I mean, ClassA is a funny term. You hear a lot of people say ClassA surfacing, ClassA this.
Yeah.
You type in ClassA on the internet, because when I started off doing this job, I didn't know what it was. You know, there was, as far as I was aware, you know, I was learning to use a bit of software to model things in 3D, cool things in 3D, make them look real. That's what I wanted to do. So I guess ClassA is kind of a mindset it's a methodology, it's how you do things. But you can apply that at any level. So you can be the guy who sat with concept designers and you can have a ClassA mindset. You might not be doing ClassA surfacing to tolerances, super tight tolerances, and really, really controlled highlights, but you can have that mindset and allow that to carry through to essentially what the ClassA team will do, which is genuinely at the end of the process. So you would start off with a sketch, you have guys working on a design theme, coming up with ideas, and then you have concept modelers trying to find a volume and make that into 3D. You would work with clay designers who would be making clay models from that. And then eventually, as the design matures and they settle on a theme and it makes its way down the process, you get to the ClassA surfacing, which is kind of integrating engineering. So you've got a design, you've settled on that, you've polished it and got that as finalized as you can, but then you need to integrate, you know, engineering into that. So that's, in a way, that's what ClassA is. You're taking all of these tight tolerances, packaging. Most of the time, you're in a flange behind a lamp or something. You're trying to get a 0.5 mil offset somewhere that has to be precisely 0.5 mil offset, you know, with a 3-degree draft. And, you know, you're fighting the surfaces to maintain the design and to manage the engineering criteria. So I guess, in a way, ClassA is pairing those two. So
interesting.
You've got a lot of jobs to do. You've got to keep the design intent. You can be doing anything though. I mean, at times you can be sketch modeling and concept modeling parts of that car as you go along. So quite often you're involved at all levels of design. So you're putting something in that's quick to find the theme, to find the design, to find the lines of the vehicle or phone or whatever it is you're modeling. And then your job is to really get into the detail, to really look at the highlights of the surfaces and to make sure that where surfaces meet, you've got they're positional, but within thousandth of a millimeter. So
wow.
5,000th of a millimeter sometimes when you've got surfaces, and then you've got angles of tangent, you've got to be within 0.075 degrees when the surfaces meet together, so the angles have got to be set.
I see.
And these are all things that you have to manage and build in the packaging, the engineering criteria, and sort of make sure that everything, everything's met.
Now, when I was explained, it's just really basically when I was learning CATIA, they were saying, well, the monkey level stuff that you do is like, because I just had to create like basic surfaces for reflectors and lenses.
Yeah.
And then that didn't need to be, class A. And so we would just take other shapes maybe sometimes and use that to cut out of the solid that we were working with, and that would be fine. And we could make a model out of that, and we could mold that. But our instructor was like, oh no, well, class A, it's all splines, like you don't have surfaces that you cut from other surfaces. You have to have like, everything is in these like, they're splines. They're
I know what you mean.
You're working on a totally different plane of thinking about CAD itself.
Yeah.
Is that true?
It is. Yeah, it is, definitely. I mean, you can, I guess you look at an iPhone or something like that, or the original iPhone, and look at the surfaces and how they're smooth, and you can't feel anything where you've got the shut gaps and the parts meet. And that kind of embodies what maybe class A is perceived as. And that, what you're doing as a class A model is you want to achieve the best quality surfaces. So you want this thing to look amazing. You want the curvature to flow. When we measure curvature on the surface, it's not just looking at the software and the figures, the analysis software and what figures it gives you. You're looking at curvature plots and curvature graphs to try and gauge where the transition of a surface changes to meet another surface. And you're looking at the acceleration of a surface. So I guess when you're making something like a reflector or something, you don't need to spend 3 weeks making sure that the edge of that surface comes up at the set angle, or the highlights read a certain way on that surface. You want that to meet the criteria you're working to. So I guess it takes you back to what criteria you have to work with. What is the end goal of what you're doing? So I think with class A, you're really polishing the surface. You're really looking at highlights. So on an exterior class A surface, or on the car exterior, if you like, you have analysis tools that show you the highlights. So they will highlight straight away where the light will run across the surface, given an angle. So you have to look at that, and you want to see how the highlight will run over the wheel arch, along the body side. And as that transitions up and over the shoulder line of the vehicle, you want to make sure that highlight's controlled. And it may be that you've got one little control point that needs to move up 1/10 of a millimeter. Wow. And that and you might spend a week chasing these.
Is that how you do it?
Flat spots around the car. But these are things that people don't, at that level, people won't see them. So if you go into a showroom, you look at this kind of thing, wow, this supercar is amazing. It looks absolutely stunning, but you don't actually appreciate what's gone into that to try and achieve. You just know it looks good.
Yeah.
But you might not know why.
It's like going to a fancy restaurant. Like, it tastes good. I have no idea why this food costs $1,000, but it tastes good.
But it comes down to everything, I guess, because I was taught from the beginning. I mean, ISOM Surf is the tool that I use. So that's the sort of my day-to-day software package that I use or have used in the automotive industry. That when I did my training, it was really only Autodesk Alias and ISOM Surf that were the main tools that being used in the companies I worked in. And ISOM Surf was kind of I'd never heard of it. I started off with Alias. So I started teaching myself Alias, thinking...
I haven't heard of any of these programs before I met you.
Exactly, yeah.
Wait,
but I mean,
before we get into the software though, maybe like let's back up to so we understand your path into even that. Mm-hmm. Like how did you, because you did you go to school for this original?
No, I was raised in a forest.
Raised in a forest. Wow, that's amazing. By bears.
By bears, by 3 bears. I had probably a strange path, but then I guess I speak to quite a, obviously you speak to people in the industry, in other industries, and not everyone has a sort of the traditional path into something. And I in school, or if we go back to the beginning, when I was really young and we got our first computer at home, because back in the day...
When was that? What year was that?
Any youngsters watching... Well, I was born in 76 and we got our first home computer maybe when I was about 7 or 8, I guess.
Wow.
I mean, this thing's probably got less power than your mouse has got. So we're talking really basic. And you had, for kids, for youngsters watching this, you had to load programs and games on cassette. And then some people will be watching this going, what's a cassette? You have to Google it, I guess. But
they were made of rocks.
yeah, they were made of rocks from the forest. But yeah, so I got bored waiting for games to load, so I would read the manuals, and I taught myself to program.
What?
This computer, because I would just have a manual with the basic language it was, and I would read the thing and learn to program whilst the games were loading. So that got me hooked on computers. What I liked to do was make graphics programs. And these were like super, super basic colors spinning around, lines, vectors, this sort of thing. Really, really simple stuff.
Wait, so you're telling me your training started at like 7 years old? You trained yourself.
because I was waiting for a game to load.
I forget how long it would take. You're right. They would take forever to load.
Yeah. So you could go away and come back and the thing would still be loading. So anyway, so I got it. I thought programming was where I wanted to be. Oh. So through school, I focused on doing IT and a little bit of computer programming. I got an Amiga when I was in secondary school, so Commodore Amiga, which was really popular home computer for gaming. Oh, okay. And I started doing graphics in it. So just 2D graphics. There was a software called Deluxe Paint. And I just loved that.
It had 6 pixels. It was amazing.
6 pixels to play with. Can you imagine? But I got hooked on that. So I started doing some graphics on that. And then I saw, with following that, 3D stuff coming in, which is very basic, ray traced, very basic 3D models. And I kind of...
What was the first 3D thing that you saw that came through?
First... It would have been in gaming, I guess. It would have been gaming before really any sort of the Pixar movies. I mean, I don't know where we go back to the first Pixar stuff, but it would have been before that. It would have been through the Amiga. So there used to be these groups called cracking groups. They would copy games. So I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I had no money as a kid, so that's how we got our games. They would have these super cool demos that they put out on disc, and they would have 3D graphics, music that they'd done themselves, and for me, that was great. So I loved 3D graphics, I loved the games, I loved the art that you could get through these computers. So
I wonder if there was actually 3D graphics on video then before it reached industry, because I mean, for a while, all we had was AutoCAD, right? Like 2D.
Yeah. See, I don't know, because I've seen the images of these old, these huge silicon graphics machines, guys with like a pen having to move or typing coordinates. I mean, my mum, she's a draftswoman. Really? So she, at home, we had this huge drafting table, and she would sit there and you got the sliding ruler and the scalpel and the pens.
Light table.
So she was doing that, and she transitioned to AutoCAD. So I guess maybe some of the influence came from there. I don't know, but for me, it was about how do I get these super cool. I wanted to be in games. I wanted to make games. I wanted to make super cool games and do computer graphics. And I thought the way in then, there was no, you couldn't study it. So when I left school, you could study IT, but you couldn't say, right, I want to do 3D modeling. As far as I was aware, there was nothing like that. There was
I
no
don't think so.
computer art. So I did IT, left school, went to college to do programming. But a year in, I reached saturation point. I've been teaching myself stuff I just had enough.
I love that term.
Yeah.
It sounds technical,
honestly,
so it's okay. I'm done. I've reached my saturation point.
Well, I'd had overload, I think, for years of just being, because I'd turned up at college and I thought, right, great, this is where I get to learn to make really cool, because I'd seen these demos and stuff that games companies were putting out, and they were amazing. You know, they were almost like I don't know, dance videos in a way. They had this really cool music. They had these super graphics. Even some of them, I would copy the music onto cassette to just play in my Walkman. It was amazing stuff.
A cassette.
And then I got to college, and it was back to databases, Excel spreadsheets, physics, and that to me was challenging. The physics side of things was challenging. I was okay at maths. It was nothing special, but I didn't want to do that. The programming classes I loved, and I just did my own thing within programming. But then everything else about it, I hated with a passion.
Oh.
So I dropped out.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was the right thing or the wrong thing to do, but at the time I thought I could sit here for 2-3 years now studying and not really get anywhere, because I know myself, I need to believe in what I'm doing. If I'm not bought 100% into what I'm doing, my effort won't be there, and it's going to be a waste of time. So I dropped out of college. I then went on to do many things, completely unrelated. My dad has a building company. He was a carpenter and joiner by trade.
Really?
He always said to me, son, you need to learn a trade, but never ever get into it. So I thought, well, perfect timing, I'll go and do that. So I went and did carpentry and joinery.
Wait, why did he say that? What was the rationale behind that?
Well, I guess because, he's amazing at what he does. He's such a skilled craftsman, but not everybody who's amazing at what they do becomes, super successful and makes a lot of money at it.
Yeah.
And at the time, I think there was a lot of work. So the people I knew who were going into building industry were traveling a lot. So they were going over to Germany. There was huge contracts over in Germany at the time. They were doing a lot of building work. And so I guess if you wanted to travel and do that at the time, then maybe it was a good thing to get into. Back home, for a number of different reasons, economic, social, things were tough, I guess. Early 90s. I don't know. I mean, as a kid, you don't know, do you? If your parents say, don't do this, you just think, well, okay, I can take a bit of that advice and not do it. But he was, he always said, if you learn a trade, you have that to fall back on.
Yeah.
You've learned something, then go and chase what you want. But you always have, a physical trade to get back into.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. I took to it really well. I completed the course in half the time that they allocated to do the courses. So I really loved, because, you're making something with your hands. You've got to, I guess, like 3D modeling. You're constructing a window frame. You're making a table, a wardrobe. It could be anything. So I did that.
Wow, that was part of your coursework? You were getting to make things?
Not a wardrobe, but that was as an example. You could make. No, if I think about my course, some of the guys on that course, they'd put screws in with a hammer, that sort of thing. It wasn't the best, but you got out of it what you wanted. So if you wanted to go in there and you wanted to put the hours in, you wanted to make a window frame, some people are just there to get the certificate. Mm-hmm. But I've always wanted to learn. The same with 3D. I didn't want to just go in and say, okay, I'm learning 3D software just to do this modeling and learn as little as I need to be able to get the job. I want to actually understand what I'm doing. So I really want to ask the questions. I guess it drives tutors crazy, because you're asking constant questions like, what does this function do? Like, we don't need that yet. But I just want, that's me naturally. I just want to know what everything does, how it works, why it works. Yeah. So I did that. And then I managed to get myself I still love 3D, computer art, and I built my own little cheap PC for nothing, so I had that at home. You know, we fast forward a few years now, I'm 19 or 20, I guess, and I've working full time, doing something completely different and unrelated. I think at the time I was probably working in tool hire or something like that. So
what does that mean?
In account management or something.
Oh.
But I kept as a hobby. I got hold of a copy of 3D Studio Max, and I taught myself.
Never use the coursework that you learned eventually?
Ever used what, sorry?
The other program, the second program that you took, did you never use that in industry, like for a job?
The second program?
Yeah.
Which one?
You were just talking about like you're doing building window frames.
Yeah, so I know. Yeah, so I did that. So this is kind of just to show how random my sort of journey into the industry was. I went and did as my dad advised, I learned the trade, but then I guess as a lot of people do, you end up taking a job in between. I was promised by one company, I did my carpentry in joinery, and I was working a few days a week and in college 1 or 2 days a week. And the company I was working with said, okay, when you're qualified, we're going to put your money up to this, you're going to be doing that. And I got qualified and they didn't do that. So I said, okay, I'm going to leave. I'm going to find something else to do. So then I got something else. I worked with a friend, and then I got a driving job. And the guys, when I used to drive around to these different places delivering these plant equipment, so for people working in construction.
You're like a lorry driver?
Yeah, truck driver. I think I've got the face for a truck driver.
No.
So anyway, so I did that, and then I found 3D Studio Max because I still love, doing stuff on computers, making 3D, and I was still interested, really interested in getting into games because I thought that's where I started this whole love for through gaming.
Right.
So I decided in the evenings I would do that. So I did what I could. I literally sat there and modeled everything around me. So my first model was one of these poise lamps. So I had one of those on my desk. So I modeled that and I measured everything. So it was super accurate. Wow. So maybe this is where the ClassA comes in.
Wow.
So I measured everything.
Something comes, some sort of personality trait or disorder, I don't know. Comes
so there was CD, but I modeled that. I modeled my mouse, my computer, and then everything around me. Then I started going to evening classes for this college and studying 3D Max modeling, lighting, rendering. I mean,
3D Max, is that a program?
Yeah, it's polygon modeling. So it's subdivisional modeling. It's used in the games industry, and it was quite popular then to get into the games industry. But at the same time, I was by then working full time as well, buying my first house, starting a family. So this is probably a few years on from that. Maybe I was 24, 25. So I taught myself everything I could, and we didn't really have there wasn't much on the internet. There was some stuff on the internet, but there wasn't anything like now. There was no YouTube. You couldn't just go on and, you had to find documents if you could.
Yeah. It's hard to even remember that now, thinking back, like, oh, wow, we had nothing. We had nothing to go on.
But now, I mean, if you want to do anything, you go on YouTube. I mean, I've been doing stuff on the car today because something's happened on the car. And I was like, right, YouTube, how do I do this? And that's so amazing. So for anybody learning now, it's never been, I wouldn't say easier because
accessible.
Learning anything isn't easier, but you've got so much at your fingertips just to get hold of instantly. And you can ask the questions because I just had to do random searches for documents that said 3D Studio Max. And it was like, you could find anything. You couldn't just put in, how to create an object in 3D Studio Max because you would find nothing. You were just lucky if you got a document.
Right.
So I learned that. I tried to get into the games industry, but the problem I had was
that a tool for the games industry or was it the general? Yeah. Oh, okay.
I mean, what I loved by that stage of 3D modeling and graphics and computer graphics was what really got my interest. Obviously, we moved on from 2D 6 pixel sprites and this stuff, was just how realism was starting to come in. So you could get, I mean, even something simple, like you could get a sphere in the software, or the old teapot, which used to be the standard, object that these softwares would use. But then you could get it so it looked like it was made of concrete. You could get it so it looked like it was made of glass. And to me, that was just like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, I need to know how you do that. I need to know how you can get this object, which is just dots, or it's just maths, on a screen to look like it's a real sphere on a desk in a room, like it's lit correctly. And that to me was just so addictive, and I really, really wanted to know how to do that. So that's what I challenged myself to do, and I really wanted to get into games and just model cars, model characters, model scenery, building. It could be anything. Just wanted to get it because I love games and I love 3D modeling. So that to me that's where I want to be. I'm going in that direction. So I'm heading off trying to do that, but it didn't happen. So I was kind of knocking on the door, and I was speaking to games companies and agencies who recruit for games companies. And obviously, even back then, a lot of it's portfolio work. So you need time to really hammer into, and I had stuff I did from college. I even did a little advert for an Indian company for a credit card, I think it was. So I animated this credit card with hands, and it came walking out into this stadium with people around, did this little dance, and there was some, I can't remember, some music or something, and I got a job. I got paid to do that by a guy who was on the course. So that was my first gig.
Wow.
But it was so difficult to get into games because there were kids who were just out of school, who were as good as me, as eager as me, but they could go and work for £5,000 a year. And this is what the companies were offering, because they were saying, we've got a position for you. You can come in as a junior. We can give you some work, but this is, and I was saying, well, I'm already 24 now, or whatever. I've got a house I'm buying. I've got a family that I'm starting. I can do weekends free. I can do evenings free. I can I can do anything that I need to do to get me into the door. But I needed, even a minimum wage, but I needed an actual wage to do this. And that's the thing that I found at the time was impossible. That really for me was kind of, I knocked on that door, and I couldn't get over that obstacle. So
I'm surprised even with people who aren't getting shafted by like, hey, you're fresh out of school, so we're going to take advantage of you. Like in the UK, the salaries that I see, I'm like, I wouldn't take that as an intern in the United States. Like it's, you guys, it's hard. It's hard trying to get by. And it is so much education that you're still putting in, just like the rest of the world.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I don't know what it's like now. I mean, maybe it's different now. Maybe, I started whilst over lockdown. I kind of joined a few groups because I've been teaching myself subdivisional modeling, polygon modeling again, and taking the time out during lockdown to get back into that. So I've joined a lot of these webinars that they've had. I think now there's a huge focus on getting younger people into games, which is great to see. So I think there's a lot more channels to get in there, but I don't know if the kind of wages have improved. So I don't know how easy it is for people. If you're at home with mum and dad and you've got, it's just pocket money. You're doing what you love doing, and the money you get is just going to pay for whatever it is, whatever your vices are at the weekend. So, if you want to go and have a few beers with friends, that's enough to pay for that. So you don't really, it doesn't matter. But if you've got,
but when you were 24 and you had a house,
you can't just say, oh, okay, I'll take the job. I'll take 5,000. Thanks.
Did you have like kids at that point?
By that point we were expecting our first child.
Oh yeah.
No. So we were just, so as I came out of that college course and I was confident to start applying for jobs, that was when I was literally buying, the first house was going through to buy the first house, and it's, it's not big money, so I didn't need to earn huge money, but I just needed to earn, for example, maybe 16,000 was the, entry level to get me in there. But you just couldn't get those offers. You know, if I had, it was kind of a catch-22. If I had 5-10 years worth of experience, I could go to them and say, I've worked on 3 AAA games. This is my huge portfolio. You know, I 16,000. Yeah, they'd be like, okay, come in. You're at the beginning,
right,
and you need a decent wage, but you can show that, you know, this is what I've done so far, and they're happy with that. Then that was the challenge. So then I had to park that idea, focus on the family, the house, and earning money. So I ended up working in finance.
really,
Leasing cars. So I ended up working for a bank, leasing cars, and yeah, just kept tinkering away. So kept going with it, you know, in my own spare time with what I could. And then we're moving on quite a few years now, maybe 10 years eventually. And since then, my brother's gone to uni. He wants to be a car designer. And I've never really known, other than the computer side of things, computer graphics that I'm obsessed with. I've been that sort of person that knows this is what I want to do when I grow up. This is, you know, that never in school didn't really have that aim, other than I just loved computer graphics and gaming. And that was, but then it wasn't a career. You know, you didn't really hear anybody say, yeah, you can go to university and 3D modeling. And nobody mentioned that.
Because it wasn't a thing.
No, maybe not. But he knew from day one, I want to design cars. So that's what he did. And then he introduced me while studying to design cars. He said, look, you know, we've got this Alias software. Have a look at that. That's 3D modeling. I was like, well, it's cars. It's not games. He's like, well, just have a look. What do you think? And I got the bug again. And I was like, wow. Software, put it on a machine, did the tutorials, and I was like, yeah, this is really cool stuff. So then I'm in the catch-22 again, because I've got this job. We've now moved on. We've got 2 kids. By this point, we've moved down from Manchester, and you know, in the UK, we've moved down to the South Coast. We've started things, you know, fresh. We've new jobs and everything. And I'm thinking, well, how do I learn and earn? How do I get myself up to speed with enough of the portfolio, the job somewhere? And yeah, how do I make that transition? It almost seems impossible again. So my brother kept intermittently saying to me, come on, we'll be asked, do I know any modelers? And you want to be a modeler, and you're doing something else that you maybe don't want to do. So I made some contacts. I emailed some people. I spoke to some agencies. And this is probably what I would advise anybody who's looking for a way in. It's maybe not traditional, you know, college, university, not a straight line entry, and they want some way in. And I would say, look, you know, you find out what agencies work within the industry, introduce yourself, explain what you want to do, then try and make. I was lucky because I got my brother was in a good position. He was starting in the industry. He had some contacts already. He some names, but I just kept on not pestering, but in a nice way. So I send emails out to these people who I didn't really know. I just said, you know, it's Kenny's brother. You know, I want to do this. I'm really interested in that. This is what I've been doing. And eventually, in back end of 2011, so I'm 34, I think, by then. So that's quite old, I guess, for getting into the, you know, most people go to college, university, out into the industry.
Yeah.
I got a phone call from a guy called Steve Colbert, I think it was initially, and he was at a company in Coventry in the Midlands, which is as you probably know, the hub for car design in the UK.
I did not.
And it's kind of like where everyone, you know, there's got a great college there, great university.
Is it just like Detroit, Michigan?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never been there.
Is there a lot of Motown music?
They've got a lot of studios there, a lot of agencies, a lot of satellite studios. Jaguar and Land Rover are based there. Aston. They've got, you know, it's got a lot of heritage in Coventry. And he was there with a company that had just potentially landed huge contracts with Lotus cars, so sports cars.
Ooh.
So I was like, okay. And he said, do you want to learn? He said, I've seen your I'd made myself a skateboard at one point, one of my other stuff, and I made all these formers and I made a press and got all these laminates and this glue from America, and I'd made this longboard type thing. And he said, "Oh, I've seen your blog. I've seen what you've made on there, and I really like the fact that you understand 3D form. Forget about you've been working in finance. That's not interesting." He said, "I can clearly see you like 3D modeling. You've got an eye for 3D form. You're really trying to get into the industry. So do you want to learn ISOMSurf?" And at that point, I was like, "Yeah, what's ISOMSurf? I have no idea. Never heard of it." So I Googled ISOMSurf, and this software, I thought, this can't be right. And I rang him back and I said, "I've Googled ISOMSurf. It looks like something from the 70s. It's got a smiley face in the corner. It's these horrendous colors." And he's like, "Yeah, that's ISOMSurf.
That's the one."
That's what we're doing." He said, "But don't do any of that. Come to Coventry and we can, I got a really small wage because, I think they were charging people at the time for these courses. So there was a lot of guys when I started there. There was maybe 6 to 8 on the course to begin with. And these were guys who were clay modelers wanting to transition into CAD. They were engineers, they were all kind of industry guys. And I was just me sat in the room who didn't have a clue about car design. It was like a new language. And I rang my brother after the second day there and I said, "Look, I don't think I can do this. They're talking about waistlines and they're talking about cowls and they're talking about," I said, "Not only do I not know the software in the industry," I said, "I don't know what they're saying."
It's a foreign language.
I don't understand any conversation. And he said, "Look, just stick with it. Just stay there, keep going and, keep tapping away." And I did. And I asked millions of questions. I went home and I researched I literally had to go on the internet and get pictures of cars and say, "Okay, what's this part? What's that part? What does it mean?" And I had it drawn out in pads and my notepads were like this. It was ridiculous. And I was writing everything down every lesson and just trying to take in as much as I could, learn this new software, learn this new industry, this new language. And yeah, I got we got taken on and we got put in this project for Lotus. So
that's amazing, Adam.
And if you wanted to share the picture.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I'll try and
the amount of drive that you have and self-motivation for when you are interested in something, teaching yourself is really amazing. I don't think a lot of people have that. And that's kind of how you got to where you are. It wasn't anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it helps that obviously a massive help was to have my brother in the industry, and that gave me some. But I guess the people who don't have that as well, who they're trying like I did to get to do something within any industry, is just introduce yourself, get to know some people who are in the industry, who are, it's easy these days because you've got LinkedIn, you've got, all of these amazing apps and forums for places, there's ArtStation for gaming, there's everything online. You can go and create a portfolio, introduce yourself to somebody. You can say, "Okay, I want to work at Lotus Cars." So you find somebody who works there, and in a polite way, obviously don't, harass these people. Just, my advice is just to introduce yourself. And if you're passionate about it, do as much as you can in your spare time or full time if you're younger, and just make that introduction. And occasionally, just keep in touch with them. And you will eventually, if you really try it, I'm sure you'll eventually get the break. And that's what happened with me.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to note that, like you didn't have what people would think of as the traditional path to get there. I think a lot of
by no
people,
means,
like they think that they need to get an engineering degree and they need to suffer through 6 years of physics and material science, and they have to like work for very little pay doing just really boring CAD work.
Well, you still got to work for little pay.
Well, yeah, that too. But for years, doing stuff that's boring, and you still worked really hard, but you came in through a totally different door, and it was kind of a shortcut compared to what people think that they need.
Yeah.
Like there are non-traditional paths that aren't based on, because I think a lot of people think that, okay, I'll get a mechanical engineering degree and I'll start to work at one of the big 3 automotive suppliers, and then I'll just be really good at what I do and someone will like promote me up. And like it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I guess there's, that was my experience, and that's what happened to me. I mean, I don't, I see a lot of examples of people who go traditional routes. So they go college, university, maybe a gap year or 2 and travel the world, then they come into, but even for guys who do that, it's not, I hear all the time about people who just don't make it. They don't make it in, and maybe that's not because of skill level. In some instances, there is an element of luck. There's definitely an element of who you know and who you introduce yourself to. But just be polite but persistent with the sort of introductions you make for yourself, and I'm doing it again now. I'm teaching myself polygon modeling, so it's going back to what I did originally with a different bit of software, and it's it's been amazing learning, and I can see my skills getting better and better, and my the level of what I do is increasing quite quickly doing that, thanks to lockdown mainly. Otherwise I'd be doing the day job, but it's just about keeping at it and just keep going and see where you end up.
I think that's a great mark of a true talented person who's in a technical field. Like they like to learn. To me, a red flag is I don't like to learn, and they're hesitant to learn new programs. But it's a very scary thing to try to pick up a program where you're just at the bottom again learning.
Yeah.
You have stuff you can share? Are you able to share some?
Yeah, if I just share, this was so I mentioned my first job was through a company called Envisage in Coventry, and they were as a satellite studio doing some work for Lotus, and this was there was a team of us. We didn't get to work on site, so I didn't get to see the cool. I went once for coffee and a meeting, which for me was amazing because I've not been to the actual studio. I mean, where I was working had a clay studio inside. They had some really cool stuff going on there, so it was kind of in between, but it wasn't a design studio for a big OEM. And so work on, the first thing you're working on was the sports car. But you're not always you're not always the main one guy that makes the amazing looking sports car. You're a team ended up being a team of about 20 people.
Wow.
Working on the inside of an opening for headlamp. So you've got to remember that there's a lot of components go together to making the full car, and you can spend, you can be on the rear of the car, solely on the rear of the car. It just depends where you end up being placed and what you work on, and that can change. Some places I've been at, that can change on a daily basis. One day you're on this, you just get into that, and then you're on something else. So you quickly move around from, as and when they need it in firefighting a lot of the times. But
same with optical engineering and automotive.
Yeah. Eventually you get to the super cool sports car. But I'll give you an idea of what the project was. It was cancelled in the end, I think.
Oh.
But that's industry. That happens a lot. You can go 3 years on a project and that it never sees the light of day. So this was a concept design. If I
got it.
See that?
Yep.
Yeah, so that was I think this was the year before I started. This was at one of the car shows, and this was revealed as, I think Lotus at the time were going to
cool.
5 new programs, which is why they needed this team of people training up quite quickly and bringing into the industry. And
for those of the people that can't see it, because it's the podcast version, it's a very, very sexy coupe. It's just, trust us, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, but that may have made into production at some point. I'm not sure. I forget what happened with that, but
wow, look at those, the handles on the car were very futuristic.
But obviously with the concept sketches, a lot of the things get, not always, but quite a lot of time get diluted down to something more feasible. as you know, you start off with this amazing sort of floating hover car with all of these super cool materials and features, and then you've got to actually, in the end of the day, you've got to make it.
Wow, it's so boring now that we have to make it.
Yeah, but a lot of the times, I mean, working in Sweden with Geely, that was, they were really pushing to sort of realize a lot of their early ideas and really pushing for the technology. And you see a lot of that in cars now, I guess. As tech moves on more and more, it becomes, I guess, easier to bring these futuristic ideas into cars. These big flat screen panels where there's no buttons, you're just doing hand gestures and all this sort of crazy stuff. Then I guess they eventually filter in as tech catches up with the ideas.
So, so that project, you just had to figure out one new tool to do that, or was it multiple tools that you had to learn?
Well, so I did 2 weeks training in ISOM. So this is literally 2 weeks, but in a classroom with these other guys. This is what this does. This is how and it was literally the basics, like the real, like any bit of software, you've got hundreds of functions.
Right.
And this was using five functions or something like that. And it was how, going back to what you were saying, it's like create a box. There was no real, in that, it was just literally, how do we get these guys to learn this software as quickly as possible? So we sat there and we learned how to, obviously we learned about the Class A side of things because that was the intention. We were always trained from day one to be Class A modelers. So it was always going to be about the highlights, about the controlling the surfaces, even as much as how you put all of these surfaces together. How you control, keep them simple, keep them controlled and manageable, don't have crazy stuff going on the surfaces. So we did 2 weeks and then we were put in a room. And I think we got the model they were working on was sent to us, and we were told to analyze it from a Class A point of view and highlight areas that we would improve. Mm. So this was where I really started to learn the software, because I'm in a room with 2 or 3 mentors. At the time was Steve Colbert, who's an absolute genius guru, master at the software as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there's a lot of people like him in the industry, but he's the guy that I worked with from day one. There's a few other names anyway that were in the studio, but you really start to learn what ISOM does and what Class A surfacing is about. And you take the model that's come from concept from Lotus, and you start to analyze the curvature of the surfaces, look for flat spots, check in all sorts of directions, whether these feature lines, when you view from one angle, like a really obtuse angle, or acute angle, that there's no waviness. I mean, these are Class A, you go to such, well, designers drive it as well, and they should do, but they go to such lengths. You would get inside shut gaps and start looking at an angle. You would have to be dead to see these angles. You have to get your head inside these things, but this is what the job is. You've got to imagine every possible way of getting, so this could be a highlight line up on a bonnet or a hood of the car, coming up and down the body side, like you see on the Audis, the sweeping lines that come up the crease of the body line, and you've got to from every direction and check the angles and check the line, check there's no waviness, and that was the job. So for Lotus, we had to analyze what they gave us and said, actually, we would improve all of these things and then send the improved model back to them. Mm-hmm. So that's what we did as a team, an outside team. For Lotus.
And how long was that project?
There's a good story with that project. Don't know how much I can. How much I can
censor yourself.
That project was, I think, about 3 months in the end. Wow. There was, let's just say there's a bit of confusion between Lotus and the company I was working for, and in the end, they didn't need a big team of people. So we ended up like 20 people, trained up in ISOM to various degrees, working on something within a room. And then we got the message one day, there is no work. Lotus apparently didn't need 20 people to be trained up. So I'm sorry, you're all going to go home now. And I was like, what? I dreamed about being a professional 3D modeler for years. I almost got there a couple of times. I then managed to get the training and into it for 3 months, and now I've got to go home. And I'm thinking, who's going to hire someone with 3 months actual work experience?
So that was just a contract job, and then the contract kind of ended early?
Yeah, because I think, in fairness to them, they thought there was going to be this huge project. They were probably told, let's just say it was lost in translation between the OEM and the agency, that there was going to be this work, because they wouldn't have trained 20 guys up if they didn't think it was going to work. So I was in complete panic mode, thinking, I've got a taste for what I want to do. I've really tried for a long time to get here, and now that's it. I've been kicked out the door, along with all these other guys who've come in. They've left jobs as engineers, clay modelers. They've left jobs within the industry to come and do this. The good thing about that contract was there was training and work, which is perfect for what you need to get into the industry.
Yeah, so you probably wouldn't have been able to have that opportunity otherwise.
No.
So probably looking back, maybe are you thankful looking back that you had it, even though it was a punch in the gut for it to end so soon?
I was kind of a good, as it happened, my brother at that point was working out at Magna Steyr in Graz.
Ooh.
But, it's a beautiful place, an amazing place to go to. And I spoke to him. I said, look, I don't know what I'm going to do. I really want to do this job. This is the dream job. I want to be a professional 3D modeler. This is what I've really wanted to do for a long time. I got there, I got a taste for it, and now it kind of finished. And he was saying, well, leave it with me. And he spoke with one of the guys who was working on a project for BMW and Brilliance, I think, the Chinese manufacturer, Chinese OEM. Mm-hmm. And he spoke to their head CAD monkey, and he said, yeah, we need some people. So if he doesn't mind a pittance of a rate, which actually was probably 3 times what I was earning in Coventry.
Really?
And you're not bothered about coming away from home and being in Austria. So I just said, yeah, straight away, that, sign me up. I don't care. I didn't have the money for the flights. Being in Coventry was just paying for my accommodation. I wasn't earning anything from it. So I just knew I would find a way of doing it. So I begged, borrowed, stole to get out there.
Wow.
And that was an amazing experience. That was, it wasn't a sexy super, it was an MPV, which was done in conjunction with BMW and the Chinese company. I've got a picture, I think, I wasn't there at the end of the project, so I don't know what it transpired to be, but and I'm sure somebody watching this may say this wasn't it. In fact, no, I don't. Yeah, I decided not to use it because I wasn't 100% sure, so I don't have the picture of that.
Okay.
But anyway, this was an MPV that I worked on there.
What does MPV stand for?
For 12 months.
What does MPV stand for?
Oh, it's a people carrier. So it's like a large vehicle, and it's like a van with windows.
A people
carrier. It wasn't sexy. It wasn't a sexy hypercar, supercar. To be honest, for me, you can work on a sexy supercar, and you can be working on, the flanges that sit around, an air duct or something. Yeah. So if you love what you do, it can be anything. Obviously, at the end of the day, when everything's finished and this huge team of hundreds of people have made a product, that's what you're looking at, this really cool product. And obviously, being in that environment makes a big difference. But if you love 3D modeling, or you love engineering, or you love color and trim, or whatever you're doing, you can take the same enjoyment out of whatever it is. So it could be a van, it could be a panel van or a truck. It could be a sports car. You can take as much enjoyment out of doing, working on anything like that.
Yeah. So in Austria, how long was that project? How long were you there for? And were you going back and forth, or were you just... No.
I was home every 3 weeks, I guess. Oof. Something like that. Because I didn't have the funds to be going, and it wasn't an easy place to get to from the UK. I mean, the project came at a good time for me because, and this is probably, I know you wanted to speak a little bit about, advice for people working away in contracting.
Yeah.
And this kind of leads into that a little bit, that I loved it. It was amazing. Being away from the children and the wife was difficult, really difficult. And that was kind of like a real pull on, am I doing the right thing? Should I be here? But I just knew I loved this 3D modeling job. I loved ClassA surfacing. I loved everything about what I was doing. And the only way to keep that going, if I'd stopped then, it would have been almost impossible, I guess, to get back into it. Mm-hmm. So I kept on going. I thought, I've got to go away. I've got to work away. And and it was...
How long was it?
Almost 12 months I was out there.
Wow.
And maybe, I think it was coming up to 12 months I was on that project, which now doesn't seem long when I was spent, a long time in Sweden prior to this. But that's much easier to get to. For me, I had to travel to... Flights kept changing, so I was traveling from one airport to another airport.
Oh, no.
In Frankfurt from Gatwick, and there was an hour. So if we were delayed, I'd miss the flight out to Graz. And that became a bit of a nightmare getting there. And in the end, the only way we getting there was to fly from London Heathrow, I think it was, to Vienna. But I landed the same time as the last train from Vienna to Graz was. So I never met that train. So I was always having to pay for a hotel in Vienna, miss half the following day, and I was telling my boss, like, I don't know what to say. I'm not going to be in on Monday mornings when I'm flying because the train isn't there. And so, you're only home every few weeks by that point, and you don't want to sort of cut those 2 days of the weekend to get. So that would be sort of the kind of balancing act. If you like working away and, you want to see these amazing places and have that experience of different cultures, different countries, different teams, different people, on the flip side of that, you will have, if you know family, I guess, then there's no urgency to get back at a certain time, but you're still away from home, if you like. So you've got that flip side all this time about, you've got to make this journey back, you've got to make the journey there.
Right.
In fact, a colleague of mine from Sweden, I've worked with quite a while now, we're good friends and I used to travel with, he made a video about it. So we made a little film. It was a team of us who used to travel every week. So we'd fly backwards and forwards to Sweden every Friday and Monday. And he made a little film about the traveling. And it's quite funny. It's quite interesting to see.
So you had that job for a whole year. So then...
Whole year.
Wow. At the end of that...
That's better than my last one.
So you made it. So you made it in. It wasn't just like, well, I only got a taste.
Yeah.
And then what happened after that? So you weren't there for the whole project, so.
Yeah, I think that project, if I'm honest, they kicked out all of it was a difficult project. And I think a lot of the times where you have a studio in one place, working with, we're in Graz at Magna's facilities there. So it's huge facilities with, the factory, and you can go at lunchtime. Everyone would shout "Mahlzeit," and we'd all run off. Outside. And then you constantly hear this word, and I just knew it meant food. So everyone smiles when you hear that word, and they're all off for lunchtime.
I worked in Germany too, so.
yeah, I believe so. So so we they had the facilities there. You would walk through where they were making the vehicles. You would see these arms, welding, body panels. So that was a really cool experience working there. Graz is, for me, at the time, there was a lot of young people there. There was a lot of the team that I was on, and at the time there was a chorus project on, so there was another vehicle there. There was a mini project. There was a lot of young people whose first jobs away from home or first professional jobs were there. It was just like this perfect melting pot. It was like it was very difficult to get home without drinking, because wherever you went, you got off the tram and there's somebody having a, currywurst and, a beer and a sausage, or, you go past the Irish bar, it was very difficult to sort of say no. Time, and I had a great time, and it was hard work, a lot of learning, because I was still really on,
right?
But there was a really nice team there of experienced people who had, they would spare the time and teach you stuff, and I would always, as always, have a lot of questions, and they would have, most of the time the answers. So it was nice to develop, and there was a really, really cool team of people there.
For sure. I can see how that would be.
I'd love to go back.
Huh?
Yeah, I'd love to go back there. It would be an amazing place to go back to again.
Very cool. So I'm glad you had a positive experience when you finally got to this thing that you thought that you wanted, and then it was like, no, that was cool. That was cool. I like that.
Yeah. Well, I guess you just got to make, there was a lot of things that didn't happen right. I got there, and there was the problems with the travel and everything, but then it's all part of the experience. It's all part of, I could focus on the negatives and just kind of, think, I'll never do that again. But I liked it. I liked, the way that things would, strange things would happen. I'd miss a train, and I'd spend the night in Vienna, which was unplanned. That was kind of, for me, it was all part of the adventure.
Fun. So then what happened? So year goes by, contract's over, and then what?
Whilst I was there, Jaguar Land Rover studio in the Midlands in the UK, they were really ramping up. They were getting really busy. And a couple of times when I was there, I'd had a message from the guys at the agency or the company that I did my training with to say, would I come and work for them and JLR at their satellite studio? So back to where I started. And I had an absolute time of my life working in Graz. So I kept saying, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to stay here and see what happens. So when that did finish, and it was quite sudden, I think what they did was they got rid of the youngsters. They got rid of the inexperience in the team, and they kept on, the guys who had all the experience, who were the best modelers, I think, on the project, and they kicked out everybody who was, they just wanted to get the project finished. So we left. I rang this company and said, look, I am now interested. I didn't say no, stick your job where. I just kindly said, no, I'm enjoying Graz. And so when I got back, they said, okay, that's fine. Come and work for us. And that was good, because that was back with Steve, who the master and guru of all things ISM and 3D.
Oh, nice.
In a small team, in this satellite studio, and they had other projects on there. So they were doing a lot of cool stuff. They had some defense projects going on, some military stuff going on there. There was, it was kind of really a nice place to be working, and there was a familiar team because I'd been there before. Some new faces as well had joined the team. So, and it was kind of it was a feeder for Jaguar and Land Rover studio. So we were doing work for them, but not in their studio. So I stayed there quite a while.
Let me just back up a second. With your job in Austria, was that ISM as well that you were using?
Always ISM, yeah.
Always, okay.
They were, for doing, obviously I've got engineers that were using mainly CATIA on site, but I get my experience from the automotive industry now is that as things stand currently, there's more softwares, more tools being used. They're looking out with more to say, actually, what other things can we use? There's amazing things like, Blender, which is a polygon modeling, it's free.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people using it. They don't have to pay a license for it, where there's these bespoke ClassA surfacing, softwares are expensive.
Right.
I started, everywhere was either Alias, which was the one, Alias was the one the designers like, because it looks cool and sexy. It's these nice colors. It looks modern. Designers hate ISM, I guess. Maybe that's a bit harsh, but they look at it like you've just put a high-powered beam in their eyes. Because it's a bit scary color-wise. It looks a bit, it's not sexy and cool, but it does the job. It really is an amazing bit of software. I stuck with that because you're still learning. I'm still learning now. There's a lot I want to, constantly develop and constantly new ways of doing things, improve how you do things, and just, take thought. So you want to try and stick, for that reason, when you are first into the industry, you want to try and stick with something that you keep up the momentum and stay with that, rather than trying to, because otherwise you'll always be jumping to something.
Right.
You're like, what's that? Oh, what's that? And you kind of from this to this and not really mastering anything.
Were there other supplementary tools that you used in addition to ISOM though? Or was it really just purely ISOM?
Software, or you mean specifically software, or?
Well, yeah, but if you had hardware things that you were playing with, well, let us know about that.
Mouse.
Your mouse, yeah. Okay.
So
actually, let me ask you
that. Tools of the trade. No, I mean, it was mainly ISOM, but you would get involved. So you're dealing with the designers. So anyone who doesn't know the role, you are almost the referee or the pacifier, or the sort of, you sit between design and engineering. So you have an engineer that really wants you to change, in some cases, change the design massively to facilitate the packaging, or we're using carryover parts from previous vehicles or whatever it might be, and they just want to shoehorn that in, whatever makes their easier in a way, saves money for the program, make that happen. You've got a designer who's got this amazing, super cool hypercar that they want to make, and they want this to look specifically this way. This is right. This vision, and designers are very protective with their vision.
Oh, don't I know it?
And you've got to try and make those two things happen. So you've got an engineer that wants you to completely change the design. You've got a designer that doesn't care about what the engineer wants. He's not bothered. He wants it to look like his design. Yeah. So you've somehow please everybody and make their design work with the engineering criteria, and not only do that, but to make it in a way which is super, really high quality, and it's got to be exact.
Right.
Exact. So ISOM is the main tool. ClassA sometimes, if I'm looking at engineering models, so we would open up ClassA, and I'm not a ClassA expert by any means. I can open a model up, spin it around, with an engineer, because you need an understanding of what they're looking at. So sometimes they're not in the same room. It's going to be a Skype call, it's going to be a Zoom meeting. Mm-hmm. So you need to be able to look at what they're looking at and understand that. So even if you're looking at their screen, you still need an understanding of it. And Photoshop, so for 2D sketches and that sort of stuff, it's good if you can use Photoshop, which I do very basic wise kind of at home. And I've always messed around with it. Like I said, I've always messed around with computer art and 2D, and before this job I would make my own images and artwork in Photoshop. So I know I'm not a designer, so I don't sketch super sexy cars, phones, hi-fis, that sort of stuff, but I understand how to use that software, how to read. Would
you actually use that in your job though, Photoshop?
No, I mean, I would, if I had it on my machine, occasionally we've had to, like early on when we were working remotely in satellite offices, we would use Photoshop or a free, whatever software we had, because we would get sketches and we would say, actually, this line here, and then you can sketch on and say, well, actually, we're going to have to move it this much, or can we move and change it here? So just, rather than, I don't use it in the sense a designer would use it. So you would use sketching software or graphic software in a way that you use it to communicate. So you've got to take what they're sketching and say, this is what we might need to do it. Because I've tried with Paint on Windows to try and a line, and it's kind of like doing this, and sometimes it's not the right tool.
That's I use it a lot. The snipping tool and like Paint is like some of the most important tools that I use just for presentation.
The mouse line, but no,
so the designers though. Okay, so if you have a CATIA part that the mechanical engineers are playing with, you'll look at that in CATIA.
Yeah.
Do you ever have to import their stuff like as a step into ISOM?
Yeah. So you would export a CATIA part, or so depending on where you work, there were some places you would work where they need you to be a lot more involved. So you would go on to like a team center or something like that, where you put in the part number, you would find the part within the list of the bill of the vehicle, and you would then find that in the Teamcenter viewer, check it's the right thing, export that in as a CATIA part, and then import that into ISO. So there's you need to actually understand how, and when we have like final releases and different gateways that we meet, so obviously as a car goes from concept to final vehicle, it's ready to be sent off to be tooled, to be manufactured. Have gateways in which they can control that process. So that each gateway you're checking for design, you're checking for quality, and it gets more and more controlled as the gateways go on. So when we release the part of each gateway, we have to make sure a lot of the times it's in a CATIA part. So then the engineers can pick that up and check what we've done. Has it got the right amount of draft on the part? Are the gaps right? And they will do a lot of that analysis. So you do end up working in between the softwares.
So what about the other end with the designers? How do they communicate what they want? Is it just pencil sketches and like, here's a clump of clay, figure it out?
It can literally be anything. So, I mean, working in Volvo cars recently, when I was there, I was really close to the clay. So a lot of the times we go down, I mean, studios work in different ways. Sometimes studios don't use it at all. Sometimes they have a digital model because it's in some ways quicker to get from a sketch idea to a volume and an initial idea in 3D quicker. So you might start off in that way. So the designer will sit with a concept modeler who doesn't care too much about, some of them do, but they don't care amazingly about the highlights and the flow. So they're just like a CAD modeler, but their skills are equally as high, but in other areas, super quick, and they can find these volumes and initial design theme. And then as you mature that, you're going on from that. So sometimes you will go down to the clay and see what they're doing, because the designer may be working down with the clay modelers on some idea he has, because it's quicker for them just to sweep a line in and change it, change a feature and position something is maybe quicker in clay. So he'll work.
But then are they scanning that and making a point cloud, and then you
so you can go down and look at it and then kind of try and use what they've done. They can give you sections in it, so they can take a measuring arm and give you like dot positions in X, Y, Z, where these features sit. So you can put in your computer and see, actually, this is exactly where this feature line goes, but you may only have 3 or 4 reference points. They can scan it. So you've got as many, more than enough reference points. You've got the scan of that vehicle then, or a scan of a part of the vehicle. So they may have changed something on the nose of the vehicle. It could be body side, anywhere, interior, and they give you that part they've changed and you bring that into your model.
What would you more often be working with? What would be the more often way that you would get from designer to what?
To be honest, quite often the designer at your desk. So I would like I said at the beginning, ClassA modeling or a ClassA team is usually the latter phases. So you would usually come in 1 or 2 gateways before, maybe 3 gateways, depending on how the company works and how they're structured. But you're coming in at the end of the process. The big changes, though, they may change things entirely. The whole exterior might change because they've had a change in direction from engineering. There's the design boss who said, no, we don't like this at all. It's got to be different. So you could almost be going back to scratch. But
so is it normally the designers will kind of hand stuff off in the beginning to the mechanical engineers, and then that'll bounce back and forth?
It's kind of a process where the designer will, sometimes designers work in 3D as well, so they can put 3D model together, a basic 3D model together, which
sometimes
is great.
They're multi-talented, and it's just picking apart. That doesn't look like a leopard. I wanted it to look like a leopard.
Yeah. And it's like, no, that's my job. Don't do me out of the job. You stay over with pen and pencils. But no, it just works in so many different ways. I mean, you be working on a wing mirror on a vehicle, and you can have, it will already be there for you, the model will be there, but then there's a new engineering criteria and you've got to change it, or there's this design change. So then maybe you get a designer sat at your desk, literally drawing on a scrap of paper that he's found on your desk.
Wow.
And he'll draw something down and say, well, I'll leave you with that. And that's great. Or quite often it will be, they will take the current 3D model, they will take a couple of views, but it is a 2D image, and they will sketch over the top. So they will give you section lines, they will give you an idea of what they want, your existing model to be now. And you will then, they just leave you to it. You will then sit there and take that you have and try and make what they want, but keeping, and also with the engineers up there as well saying, no, you can't change it that much. We've got this to fit in there. So that's the job. But I mean, I love to see what's happening in clay. I mean, you can see and feel that. So you can, you've gone from a huge screen with digital, and that's amazing. That's my thing. But then occasionally to go and see the clay model and be able to actually, right, so that's what it looks like. Because sometimes I can be working on, I don't know, the interior. Well, when working on interior models, you could be working on, the side of switches, trying to get those right, or a switch pack, or a volume control, or a gear stick, something. And to you, it feels like it's the size of a car itself.
Right.
Then you go down to the clay model and you see this thing, and you spent a week agonizing over something that's as big as your thumb. And you're like, oh my God. You've got to take a step back occasionally and just remind yourself of the scale of things and how that fits in with the rest of the car. And I think it's amazing when you see all the different elements come together. And some of the stuff the designers do is just unbelievable. And this, something that looks like a photograph on 2D, you can then bring it into 3D. The clay guys can then mill it, so they can take your model, mill it out of clay, refine that in clay, then change stuff. You can get it scanned back to you. You then match what they've changed, goes to engineering, does it work? And then it does this. So you're constantly bouncing back and looking things through design, modeling, clay, engineering. And that's the kind of loop that happens with every project.
So along those lines, is there, maybe you can't talk about specific things that you've worked on?
No, it's probably best not. I probably already have spoken about some stuff. I'll get a phone call.
Because it's always nice to be able to highlight like a problem that was fixed, even if you can talk about it in a general way. But maybe you could highlight, I know we talked previously many months ago about things that you would see in your everyday life that just drive you crazy. Ugly.
Well, I panicked a bit when you said to me, can you find something at home that that is a fugly object that I'm probably the only fugly object in my house.
No.
I'm quite picky about what I have around me. So I was kind of frantically looking around for something that I could show you. The only thing I could find was a toaster. It's got some questionable sinkholes in it but it's a cheap one. It's a bit of a mess. There's a lot of crumbs on it, so I'm not going to show you that. But I think when we spoke, going back to it was
like a buzz card scanner or something, wasn't it?
Because when we first kind of got introduced to each other, I'd read an article, really, really cool article that you'd written for Develop magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on the back of that and some correspondence, we had a conversation. And I remember saying to you that I was in Sweden at the time, and there's this, as you get on the trams in Sweden, like in most places, there's this unit that they fix to the poles, that you hold on to, and it's like an EPOS machine, and it's just to hold the screen, I guess, and the mechanics within inside it, and the sort of things that they need to take the payments. But the back of this machine, which faces the seats, is horrible. me and my designer stroke 3D modeler friend I mentioned earlier would sit there and just, some days we wouldn't even say anything. You could see we were looking at it, and we couldn't look at anything else. Once we noticed this issue with the surfacing, it was just.
I'm trying to look up.
A little bit of OCD as well, huh?
I'm trying to look up an image of it. Let me know if any of these.
I've looked. There isn't any. Maybe
there aren't?
Used to.
But you're talking about the backside. Do any of these?
Don't bring me back to that horrible place.
Do any of these look like these things?
Some of these look like the culprit. Yeah, it's that getting your, you had it then.
Which one? Is it this thing?
Right. Yes, it is.
This?
It's either that one or it's either that one or it's a similar one.
This?
No, it's definitely closest to that one. That looks like the front of it. And it's rare.
Vicksburg.
This is going to make me sound like such a weirdo. It's where, it's where the surface comes down at the back and it meets the base and it kind of comes in, slopes in, but the corners, they've just not been made right. So it's really negative and hollow.
And it's the backside, and that drives you crazy.
It's the backside of that. If you can find the backside of that, please never ever show it to me.
But see, my thing is when that's the engineer's curse, and that is how you are afflicted. And
fix it and show them.
But I think the things that either we get really excited about because we're like, wow, that's a really nice design, and like our non-engineer friends are like, why are you so excited? Or if it's like, oh my God, it's gonna kill me looking at that thing. It's so ugly, and your friends again don't care. That's
I mean, sometimes you see things, I guess, as a surface designer. I mean, I noticed on some of the comments and sometimes when people message me on LinkedIn that because it's surface design, they think sometimes confuse it with traditional design. So I'm not the guy, I can draw, but I'm not amazing at drawing. I'm nowhere near the talent that these designers are who are doing it day in, day out. And they sometimes confuse the two between, surface design or surface sculpting. And sometimes designers want things in models that I think is from a surfacing point of view isn't good. To get to what they need, you can always make sure you follow the main rules for Class A surfacing or any surface. You don't want any craziness going on in the patch layouts. You want to make sure everything's controlled and neat and tidy, and you've got the right curvature plots on, you're within the tolerances which are set by the studio. All of these guidelines that you have when you're doing Class A, it's Class A surfacing. But sometimes designers, they have an idea, and as a human being, not everyone agrees on what looks, some people might like an iPhone, some people might like it. Well, phones all look the same, so that's a pretty bad example, but cars, one car is amazing to one person, it's not so great to somebody else. So sometimes you see things in design which to you makes you want to, but maybe that was intentional by the designer. So who are you to say that should, so it's difficult to do sometimes. But for a lot of things, especially this EPOS thing on the tram, it shouldn't have been there.
But that one for sure, no.
Yeah, I'm sure there was no designer that wanted that to be on there. I'm sure of it.
So if you're not like building a race car, can you explain what the advantage is of taking a design to that level? What does it do for the aesthetics when you bring in that Class A surface?
I guess it's like anything, isn't it? If you're building anything, you would want it to be built well. Whether it doesn't matter what it looks like, if it's if it's a desirable object or a garden fence, you don't want something to be badly made. And I think that comes down to just a principle. If you know there is a good way of doing something, I know there's a time and a place for just bashing something in, and I know that things have to happen. And I know about deadlines. I know about all of these things, but I would always argue. I mean, I had a conversation yesterday with an agent I was speaking with, and I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses. My weakness, if anything, is speed. I'm not super quick, but I've said, I've been on enough projects now to realize that on projects where they say, right, we want this doing in half the time, it's normally always bad. You normally always get to the end of it and somebody realizes that it's bad. And then you have to do it again. To do it again, it takes more time. So I would always say that if you know how you should make something, why make something badly? I'd rather be known for a guy that makes something to a high quality level than be the guy that just does something fast and crap.
Yeah.
Not everybody does that. There are people there who can, they're freaks. They can do the best quality at super fast speed. And, that I take my hat off to them to be able to do that. But most of the time you will compromise on something. If you rush something out the door, like anything, if you're buying a premium product, that probably hasn't been rushed without thought. They've made that with care and attention. They've looked at all of the details and they've really taken the time to get it. Shows. People can see that in the product when they look at it, even if they don't know what they're looking for. Like people will look at I guess the premium products in life, cars, phones, whatever your thing is, you can generally tell when you look at an iPhone, well, it's a cool object. You might not know why, but it's the things that people behind the scenes have done, and it's their knowledge and care and attention that's gone into that makes everybody else who doesn't know how it's made think, I want that. Don't know why, but I want it.
You can just tell the quality even though you don't know specifically the details that are telling your brain that it is.
We have this conversation a lot in studios where sometimes we will be going crazy because we're being asked to redo things that hardly change at all. Even with the measurement tools we've got on the computer, you can't see it with your eye, but then people will say that they've done research and they've shown people, for example, when you put a radii on an object, so when you've got two theoretical surfaces and you put a radius in, most of the time, 99% of the time in the car industry when we're working on radii, we make sure it's curvature continuity. So it's curvature matched to the surface you're going into. So it takes the curvature from that surface. It's not just tangent radius. And that, if you do that, you won't see the shadow line where the radius changes, where the tangent angle of the surface changes into a radius.
Wow.
It's things like that you realize when you start doing it. And not only do you have to have it curvature matched, they will put an analysis tool on it and check the curvature cone so it's looking right. The acceleration of the curvature is correct. So you go into those levels of details. Of course, the customer is never going to see that. They never see these analysis tools that we have. But if we know we've done that and we know we've done everything, humanly and non-humanly possible, machine possible to get perfect, then, it's obvious it's there.
Yeah, it's kind of like magic. Like they're perceiving it. You're communicating that, but they don't know why or how. So if someone came to you and they're building a new physical product, and they just wanted your feedback on it, honest feedback.
Always.
All that you give. What kind of things could you, like if they're like, okay, I want to build this microphone, and they, show you this CAD. They make an appointment with you on Auto Engineer, and they're like, we want this to look sharp. What kind of things can you tell me about what we should do with this? What kinds of things would you give feedback on?
I mean,
any object.
We look at the CAD model. So we take a look at the CAD, and obviously it's kind of, it's a difficult thing to answer because depending on what they wanted to do with it, if their intentions were they just wanted to get this product out as quick as possible, as cheap as possible, there will be corners to cut. But I would always offer the same advice. I would always check the model, check for obvious errors in the model, check for the surfacing quality, check for the way it's been constructed, check for, as well, it depends how far down the line of, getting this, if the intention is for it to be, I guess, CGI or, an image, then there's other things you need to look at. As long as that image looks the way it should do, there's different criteria. But if you've got to make it, you've got to say, look at the engineering criteria. Does it work? Are the part splits correct? Have we got areas that of a radius and finish into a sharp edge above the radius? Are they underflush like they should be? So you don't feel that when you're handling the object. You know, there's different things you need to check on a product that's being made. And I guess it depends what the customer wants. If the customer says, right, we want this CAD image to look super cool, then we focus on, you know, how the highlights are, the reflections on the surface, and, you know, what's troubling them about the product. What do they think doesn't look good about it? You know, there's
not
a million...
just the look, but also the feel. And,
yeah, it's all about the feel.
And,
I guess.
And then can you help too if they just wanted a cool product image to show off? Can you make that look sexier?
Yeah, I mean, you can, yeah, I mean, it depends if it's a horrendous, yeah, you can always improve on something. So depending on what they wanted to do, depending on what the issues were. So if they've got a CAD model, which is...
What if they don't even have an issue is my thing. Because I think a lot of people might not have the eye to know that they need to talk to you. So anyone who has a physical product, they could have an appointment with you and you'll find.
No, but I would be honest with them. If they came to me with a super cool CAD model and it was perfect, then I would say, there's nothing wrong with this CAD model. I mean, if that was the case, you would say to them, you know,
that's not good.
But then it depends what you're making as well, because it depends on what level of detail. This is why you have products at different levels, I guess, and different investment levels in products. But I would always advise on how to make it look, how it could look its best, feel its best, work. Because the problem might be that it's just not made right. You know, they've not thought about, you know, if it's a chrome object, so it looks chrome, and they might have this horrendous, huge black plastic panel on one side because they think that's the correct way to have this opening to allow them to get the, you know, the mechanics in there. Yeah. But I might look at it and actually think, if we do this differently, we bring the split line down here, we can, you know, tool it in reverse, and we can have, you know, everything loaded in from behind. Because this is, you know, this is what we do as Class A modelers. Because sometimes engineers will come and they're not bothered about what it looks like. They want to get this into there and close the model up and get it out the door. What's the cheapest way of doing it? But that might mean you've got a really horrible split line right where the customer sees it. It's going to feel horrible. It's going to look horrible. So you will then work with design, or whoever controls that design of that product, and say, actually, can we move this split line to here? Can we hide this in some way so the customer sees the amazing object you've designed, but have to see this cable inlet, or doesn't have to see this, you know, switch underneath? That's not part of the cool design. That's just a functional switch. Can we hide it? And that's what we do all the time with Class A modeling. It's how you try and improve how a product looks, how it feels, how it's perceived. So when somebody's buying it, you're not thinking, why is there, you know, this is a chrome object, looks amazing. Why has it got this huge lump on the back of it? It's just like a power brick. And you use a lot in products, but that's what I would do. I would look at the product, look at the model, understand what, because customers might have different requirements. They might say, well, we know this looks really cool now. Is there anything we can improve? And then I would check the surface quality and say, yeah, actually, you might be able to improve it even more by adding some volume, because a lot of surfaces in CAD models are put in, they're made flat, whereas you need to add an element of crowning and volume to a surface. So you would never make anything completely flat, but you see in some CAD, they are flat, because that's got coatings and paints and everything else. It looks hollow if it's flat.
Interesting.
So add crown. So it's things like that you would look at.
Yeah.
How to improve the quality of the CAD model. And yeah, it could be an engineering problem they've got. They've got this criteria. The engineers are telling them they've got to do this. How can we get around that without breaking the design? You know, changing the design, and that's what it's about. Yeah.
Those are really great examples. Thanks for sharing those. I think, especially you know, people who are working in smaller teams, maybe if they're building a hardware startup product and they don't have a lot of specialists on, they're not going to have a Class A Surface Pro for sure. But even when you have a really competent CAD monkeys, I don't want to keep saying that word. really?
I don't mind that term.
Really?
we got the pencil fairies, if you want to call it, the designers, and the CAD monkeys, and
but even if a company has a very good mechanical designer and a bunch of other competent people, if you keep looking at the same thing over and over again and you don't have that artistic perspective, you might never see the things that Adam Kenney you could see, like just boom in a second looking at it. You're going to have a totally different perspective as someone who understands, you know, the human side of a product and how it feels and how it looks, and you have an eye that is geared towards that. So I would that's why I want to like tell people who might be interested in polishing up their designs. They're like, but I guess it's good enough. But you don't really know because you're looking at the same thing over and over again, and you don't have that expert executive chef eye, you know.
Sometimes you don't know what the issue is. Sometimes you know there's an issue, you're not sure what it is. It could be, you know, driven by engineering. It could be partly design. It could be the way it's been surfaced. I guess if you're a small company and you don't have and I guess what I could maybe add to a company is they might have a CAD guy working there, but he isn't a Class A CAD guy. So he's putting something together that might work for CGI. It might work for engineering. It could be, you know, there's a lot of amazing, you know, CAD guy 3D modelers out there that can do like stuff I'm doing now in polygon modeling. I couldn't use it for manufacturing. It wouldn't last a second. It's not near. But to look at it as an image, sometimes it looks photorealistic with the right materials, the right lighting. You can't really tell it's not the real product. I mean, I was modeling a webcam is one of my things to do what
for fun.
One day last week or whatever. So I brought up a reference image for the one I was kind of basing it on. And then I realized, looking at the reference image, that it's actually a CAD model. Because I could something in the image that made me know straight away, well, that's it's a CAD model. But to intents and purposes, I saw it at first look real, and you wouldn't know. So sometimes you get that you can't make it, but it looks amazing. So if the company wants to take a cool looking CAD, CGI model, but they want to make it feasible to be manufactured, then I can help with that. If they wanted to, they've got a manufacturable CAD model, which is done with the intent to manufacture, with the engineering requirements, built in, but they just want to make it look better, then I can help with that. Or if you just want to be analyzed and see, is there any way we can improve, check the radiuses on these things, have we used the right sort of curvature? Can we improve the way we've built the model? Just to get some feedback, then I could help with that as well.
That's awesome. And I think I would encourage people, even if they think it's okay, to book an hour with you to have you look it over, because again, it's like that expert level of just, sometimes you want someone over your shoulder to tell you for sure that's above you in expertise, who can be like,
we all have that though, don't we? I mean, if you're looking at the same thing, you would have had it yourself in the various projects you've been on. If you spend a long time looking at something, obsessing about something, there's things you can miss. That's why doing Class A modeling for automotive, it's always good to get a colleague. We looking at this model. What do you think? Get a second pair of eyes, because they might see something it's obvious that you've missed. So if you've got a team of people working on something, or a very small team, it might be the guy who's had the idea with a designer and a modeler, or just a designer, and they've got this thing. Getting somebody outside to look at it, they might say straight away, that needs attention. This we can change a little bit, and it's good to have that.
Yeah. And so now tell me about, you have this love of video games, and you have all this experience in really, really, really knowing the details of curves of cars, and like no one else really understands that stuff better than you on the planet right now. And I know
there's a lot of people.
No. Really, when you think about it, how many people are there in this, 7 billion?
It's a small industry, It's for sure. Because I guess in the world of CAD, doing Class A modeling is very, I've learned from some really good people. There's still a lot, I always want to learn more and improve, and like anybody, I think you'll always look to get better. But Yeah, it's a small industry. There's probably not that many, there's not that much resource, I guess, outside of product design, automotive. But I guess at the higher levels, so these companies like Apple, the quality hi-fi companies that really put an emphasis on quality, how something looks, and car companies, you're probably just that pool.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But so how can you take this eye that you've developed and this really intimate knowledge of car bodies and everything, if someone were still in that CGI or computer game or video game world, how can you help that person now? How can you bridge those two worlds?
Doing the job, but not as a ClassA modeler. They're just currently modeling. They're a CAD modeler. I guess just, to repeat what we've spoken about, it's just about sharing the knowledge. And also, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that you don't already know. We've all been in situations where just to be reaffirmed about something, or just to have something reminded to you that you need to do, or you need to be careful of, just either, reaffirming about what, the best methodology for building something, or the criteria you've got to think about, sticking to when you're building something in 3D.
Haven't you recently looked into, though, like how they build things in CGI and video games?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I went and spent a bit of a time, because, I still love games. I will always love games. I'm a big gamer geek, with a passion. I have less time for games at the moment, or as you get, start a family and everything, you have a bit less time for games. But I still very interested in gaming, and I went and had a meeting with a game studio, and interestingly, they were doing something, I was surprised, very similar to what we would do in a car studio.
Really?
So they got these CGI, or these 3D CAD models, and they were, in the same way as we would gather around and look at screens and check highlights and look at these like zebra highlights where you see the stripes and you see how they compress and expand around, flat areas and high curvature areas. They were doing a similar thing where they were using the environment map from a game. So they had these 2D flat images of a body side of a car, and they had the environment map, and they could see almost as that reflected. So the environment of the game, for anybody who doesn't know, is whether it's a racetrack or a city you're going through, it would be whatever the background is, and they had that reflected in the panels. And they were showing me like round door handles where you've got this, the body side is concave, allows you for the fixing of the door handles. And they were looking for parts where the reflection of the image broke up or looked strange. Obviously, it will bend around the shape of the surface. But similarly to what we do in the car industry is we look, you look at the highlights, and if the highlight has a strange, break in it, or things don't match, if you see a stripe in the highlight and it's kind of off like that, that the surfaces aren't matching properly. If it looks like it's doing something uncontrolled, then it's probably the curvature in the surface, or you can tell from looking at these things there's a problem in the actual surface itself. So that was really interesting for me to see how what they do is very similar in some ways. And I was speaking with the guys there and saying, we do this, this is what we do in that situation. This is how we analyze that. So there's probably quite a lot of crossovers. I mean, that's something for the future. I mean, as cars and games, game graphics get, obviously with the tech and the consoles around and the PCs these days, they're like the real thing. And they actually, they're using CAD data from car manufacturers, whereas in the past they would just get reference images of a car, build that from blueprints or photographs or whatever, and build what they think is close. They now get actual production CAD data from car manufacturers, so from the likes of McLaren and BMW. They get sent these huge data files, and they've got to strip that out and just rebuild from their CAD. So it's going the opposite way.
Wow. Interesting. So
it's getting, the crossovers are there, but then, you could advise, how you would treat those same issues, because they have the same issues. They're trying to make something look realistic. They're trying to make it look, nobody wants to see this, what is meant to be, super nice line on a car become more broken up and not look right.
So even if someone were coming from that world of CGI and animation and computer graphics, and they had a question about, it doesn't have to be cars, I guess. It's just really making anything that surfs.
Yeah.
So they could book an appointment with you too, and you could look over what they were working on.
Because I'm doing the same sort of stuff now. I'm teaching myself Autodesk Maya, and that's used in the games industry. And there's a lot of methods I know from the automotive and transport industry that are very obsessive, I would say, because we're making something, and there's a history within that. Aerospace, transport, automotive. You've got to be precise, and we're talking to thousands of millimeters, and you've got to be angle precise. Now, you don't get that in games, obviously, but there's methods that I use when I'm building something it's not real, it's not going to be made, it's just for me. But I use the same sort of methods when I'm doing it. And, these are principles that I guess have worked, I think, for many different reasons, they do work, and you've got this control over quality. And obviously, the better something looks, the more realistic it looks, and the better, the better the product is.
That's fantastic. This has been very enlightening. I've learned so much about this side of the world of, even just CAD in general. Like I said, I worked in automotive, and I knew that there were people that had the clay in their studios, but I never got to go there. I never got to see what they do. So this has been really
You might get to. It's really, I think we spoke about it when I was at McLaren. That was a brief project. That was 9 months, I think, at McLaren. But that, to go in there, it's like it's like a space station. It's like going into a movie. You go through these tunnels that are completely white. It's like being in some, I don't know, Kubrick movie set. And then you come out, and there's pressure control on the air in the rooms, and there's these sticky pads on the floor that remove any dust off your feet when you walk. And there's we've got the F1 team there stripping cars down. It's
really?
That's
wild.
Really cool environments to be in, and that sort of stuff. So it's
absolutely, you are the envy of many CAD monkeys, Adam.
Well, I'd love to work in a game studio. That to me is the if I could get to work on one of those games, it's you can, everyone's, at the end of the day, you're in there to do a job. You could be working on a flange behind a headlamp 6 months or whatever. The rest of it comes with it. That's your job. You're there to do that. And, if you're in an amazing environment, or you're in, like in Graz, it was an amazing place to be, amazing team. We were in a tin shed on a roof in the middle of summer. That was like an oven. So it wasn't a sexy environment, but it was a great job and a great place and a great experience.
So if that was someone's dream, and they're either a junior engineer or if they're a student and they want to get into that and they want to ask you more questions, even though you shared so much in this interview, would they be able to?
I've got nothing more to say.
Good.
You're going to have to cut some stuff out of this.
So good. People who want to get into what you're doing, if that is like their dream, can they also book with you on Auto Engineer and talk about their career?
That's not a problem. If there's anybody who wants to talk about my weird way into the industry or my crazy path into it, and things I've learned about, how do I get to work in some studios, what advice on working abroad, contracting, anything like that, that's not a problem.
Awesome. Cool.
No issues.
Is there anything else you want people to know about? Like, you are available right now for contract work?
Right now, yeah. It's going to be, I guess, the calendar's going to be updated. I need to remember to do that, because if I book any holidays in, I've got to remember that there's this side of things now to work on. But yeah, we'll sort something out. I had a call, not through this, but just a brief chat with somebody who contacted me on LinkedIn. But it's fine. Book a time. If I'm not available, we'll book something else that works. Works with both people. It's fine.
Okay. Well,
We'll make it work.
As of today, March 19th, you might be able to get Kenny for a longer contract, but
Don't
maybe
book now though, because
maybe not
I can't
afterwards.
speak anymore. Give me an hour.
Thank you so much
great.
for your time, Adam, and I'll be sure
My
to
pleasure.
spread your links around so that people can immediately book time with you and have their own chat over coffee.
Definitely. I look forward to it.
Great.
Thank you very much.